Late on December 26, 1944, a Sherman tank shoved its nose out of the frozen woods south of Bastogne. Not rolled, not eased, shoved. Its tracks chewed through snow and mud, its hull scarred by a week of fighting, its 75mm gun swinging toward the road ahead. The crew had painted a name on it, Cobra King. And at that moment, Cobra King was ahead of the rescue column, ahead of the infantry, ahead of almost everyone who was supposed to keep it alive. Lieutenant Charles Bogus looked through the gray timber and saw the thing every tanker in the Ardennes had been warned about. A German position, concrete, low, ugly. A pillbox sitting beside the only road that mattered, and moving around that German bunker were men in American uniforms. That should have been the best sight in the world. It was not. Because by then, every American in the Ardennes had heard the same rumors so many times it had become a second weather front. German commandos were behind the lines. They were wearing American jackets. They were driving captured jeeps. Some spoke just enough English to pass through a checkpoint before anyone realized the smile under the helmet was enemy-owned. So Bogus did not wave. He did not climb out. He did not assume anything. He kept the gun where it was and called for the men by the bunker to identify themselves. For a few seconds, the relief of Bastogne balanced on something thinner than armor. Not strategy, not courage. Recognition. Because the wrong word at that bunker could have turned the most famous rescue of the Battle of the Bulge into a massacre between Americans. And to understand why that almost happened, you have to begin days earlier. Inside the town, everyone remembers for one word, but almost nobody remembers for the basement underneath it. Bastogne was not famous because it was beautiful. It was famous because roads met there. 7 hard roads ran into a small Belgian market town, and in the winter of 1944, that mattered more than any speech, any flag, or any line on a staff map. The Ardennes was a country of forests, ridges, mud, and narrow passages. Tanks could not simply go wherever the arrows on a map told them to go. They needed roads. Fuel trucks needed roads. Ammunition needed roads. Wounded men needed roads. And if the Germans wanted to break through the American line, race for the Meuse, and drive toward Antwerp, they needed Bastogne like a drowning man needs the last rung of a ladder. On December 16th, Hitler threw what was left of German strength into the Ardennes. Roughly 250,000 men surged through fog and trees under a sky so low it seemed to press the forest down onto the soldiers. For the first days, the weather protected them. The Allied air forces, usually the hammer that answered every German movement, sat grounded under clouds and freezing mist. American units that had been sent to the region to rest suddenly found tanks in their villages and artillery walking through their roads. The line did not simply bend. In places, it tore. A bulge pushed west across the map, and headquarters officers began saying the name that would stick to the battle forever. The Bulge. The Germans planned on speed. They planned on confusion. They planned on the Allies reacting too slowly. And for a moment, the plan looked less impossible than it should have. Then Bastogne began to matter. The Americans understood the roads as well as the Germans did, so the nearest major reserve was dragged into the fight with almost no ceremony. The 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, was loaded onto trucks and sent north through the dark. These were paratroopers, not fresh parade troops. They had jumped into Normandy, They had fought in Holland. They had been waiting for rest, replacements, and winter gear that had not fully caught up with them. Some men climbed onto the trucks without proper overshoes, some without heavy coats. They reached Bastogne only a few hours before the Germans reached the same approaches. A few hours. That is how thin some legends are before they harden into history. The 101st did not arrive alone. Tank destroyers came in. Combat engineers came in. Fragments of armored units that had already been battered east of town came in. The pieces were folded into a defense because there was no time to make anything clean. By December 21st, the roads were cut. The town was surrounded. Bastogne became an island in snow. There is a famous line from that moment. When one officer was told the division was about to be surrounded, he reportedly answered that paratroopers were supposed to be surrounded. It was a good line. It was also not a medical plan. Because before the ring even closed, Bastogne lost something a surrounded town cannot replace. Its surgeons. 2 days before the encirclement was complete, Captain Willis McKee looked at his field hospital northwest of Bastogne and did not like what he saw. Belgian civilians were moving past in waves, carrying bundles, children, blankets, the small ruined cargo of people who understand danger before soldiers admitted on maps. McKee had seen enough war to know what refugees meant. Something was coming. His clearing station was sitting exposed near a crossroads, too far forward, too lightly protected, too visible to anything German moving through the dark. He drove into Bastogne and warned Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe. He showed him the location. He explained the refugees. He told him in effect that the hospital was hanging out in the open. McAuliffe sent him back. Several hours later, German armor rolled into the clearing station. The hospital was taken. The tents were taken. The vehicles were taken. The supplies were taken. More than 140 American medical personnel and patients were captured in a single night. One medic was killed, and with that, the 101st Airborne lost its forward surgical capability before the worst of the siege had even begun. That sentence sounds administrative until you imagine what came next. A division was surrounded by German artillery, tanks, machine guns, and cold. Men were hit by shell fragments. Men lost feet to frostbite. Men were crushed in collapsed buildings. Men came in with torn bellies, smashed limbs, broken jaws, and the stunned silence of people who had survived the first wound, but would not survive the waiting. And inside Bastogne, the people left to treat them were not useless. They were brave. They were trained. They were determined. But they were not the surgical system that had just vanished into German captivity. What remained was a scattering of battalion doctors, dentists, aidmen, clerks, medics, and improvised stations under churches, houses, garages, and cellars. They could stop bleeding. They could splint bones. They could inject morphine when there was morphine. They could hold pressure on a wound with fingers that were numb from cold. But when a man needed an operating room, the town had mostly become the wrong place to be alive. That is the part the clean version of Bastogne usually steps around. Not because it is unimportant, because it is harder to fit on a monument. The artillery did not care where the red crosses were painted. Shells found ambulances. They found aid stations. They found aidmen bending over men in the open. The fog and snow blurred everything, and the German guns hammered the town at odd hours, not as a single theatrical barrage, but as a grinding interruption to sleep, movement, treatment, thought. No one in Bastogne was truly behind the line. There was no behind, only inside. Supplies dropped fast. Plasma froze in bottles before it could be used. Penicillin ran low. Blankets ran low. Anesthetics ran low. Bandages became something to cut, reuse, and stretch until the material itself seemed ashamed of what was being asked of it. In one aid station, an amputation was performed with a large knife and cognac for pain, because that was what war had left in the room. The wounded lay on stone floors, on straw, on doors pulled off hinges. The men treating them worked by candlelight while the town shook overhead. And then 2 civilians stepped into a gap the army had not managed to fill. One was Renée Lemaire. She was 30 years old, Belgian, from Bastogne, a nurse trained in Brussels who had come home to visit her parents before the offensive trapped the town inside history. She could have gone into a shelter. She could have stayed near her family. No one would have called her a coward for surviving. Instead, she walked to an American aid station and offered her hands. The second was Augusta Chiwy. She was 23, born to a Belgian father and a Congolese mother, raised in Bastogne, trained as a nurse near Brussels. She was a black woman in a cellar full of wounded white American soldiers in 1944, which meant she walked into danger carrying not only bandages, but the weight of the world those soldiers came from. Some men did not want her touching them. At first. She treated them anyway. Dr. Jack Pryor, an American battalion surgeon, had set up an aid station in the basement of a department store on the Rue de Neufchâteau. He needed help, and he got 2 women the army had not planned for, could not replace, and would take far too long to honor properly. Lemaire changed dressings, comforted the dying, organized what could still be organized, and kept human warmth alive in a place turning into a storage room for pain. Chiwy worked beside her. She carried stretchers. She cleaned wounds. She helped bring men in from streets where artillery had been tearing roofs and windows into shrapnel. At one point, she put on an American uniform so she could move through the battlefield more easily and bring wounded men back herself. There is a story from her memory that feels impossible until you understand what it really was. She was outside, near a foxhole, working on a wounded soldier when the snow around her began jumping in tiny bursts. Little white flurries flicking up from the ground. She later called it dancing snow. She thought it was beautiful. The snow was not dancing. Machine gun bullets were striking the ground inches from her body. That is how close death came to Augusta Chiwy, before history even learned how to spell her name. While the aid stations fought their private war under the town, the Germans outside Bastogne decided to present themselves as gentlemen. On December 22nd, General Heinrich von Luttwitz sent a surrender demand under a white flag. The letter was polished, formal, and faintly contemptuous. It told the Americans their position was hopeless. It warned that German artillery could destroy the town. It gave them 2 hours to surrender. The famous answer came from McAuliffe. Nuts. The German officers did not understand the word. An American explained the spirit of it. And in the popular memory of Bastogne, that is often the center of the story. One word, one defiant commander, one surrounded division refusing to fold. It is a good story because it is true. But it is not the whole truth. At the same hour the word nuts was becoming legend, the town was bleeding in basements because the hospital had been captured. At the same hour commanders were refusing surrender. Civilian nurses were doing the kind of work armies later turn into citations only after someone makes them feel guilty enough. And outside the perimeter, the German army demanding a dignified surrender was less powerful than it wanted anyone to believe. The offensive depended on speed and fuel. It had speed at first. It did not have enough fuel. The Germans had scraped together millions of gallons, but not enough to carry the attack to Antwerp unless they captured American fuel dumps along the way. They mostly did not. American troops and supply units hauled fuel away or burned it before German tanks could reach it. The narrow Ardennes roads became clogged with vehicles, guns, horses, wrecks, and men trying to push an army through a forest by timetable. German columns sat in traffic, burning the fuel they had while waiting for fuel they needed. Ammunition was rationed. Repair parts were scarce. Crews cannibalized wrecked vehicles by the roadside. And under all the steel in the German propaganda image, the army was still dragged forward by horses. Not as decoration, as logistics. Guns moved behind teams. Supplies moved on carts. Men who imagined the Battle of the Bulge as a parade of panzers would have found, on many roads, a horse-drawn wagon jammed behind a stalled truck while everyone waited for the weather to clear and the sky to turn deadly. The most famous German spearhead, Joachim Peiper's armored column, drove deep into the American rear and then ran out of gas. His tanks did not end the offensive in triumph. They stopped. Crews abandoned vehicles in the snow and walked east. The machine everyone feared had become a thing men had to leave behind. But before that weakness fully showed, the Germans used one last weapon that weighed almost nothing and spread everywhere: suspicion. The man behind it was Otto Skorzeny. He was already famous in Germany for daring commando operations, and Hitler gave him a strange assignment for the Ardennes. Operation Greif. The idea was simple enough to be terrifying. Dress German soldiers in captured American uniforms, put them in captured American vehicles, send them through the confusion at the start of the offensive, have them cut wires, reverse signs, spread false orders, blow things up, and make the American rear feel unsafe even when no German tank was nearby. The plan sounded larger than it became. Skorzeny wanted fluent English speakers. He mostly got men who knew classroom phrases, movie lines, and enough American slang to survive a short conversation if the American on the other end was tired. Still, some of them got through. German teams in American uniforms turned signposts. They cut telephone lines. They moved through checkpoints. One team helped destroy an ammunition dump. The physical damage was limited. The mental damage was enormous. Because an army can handle an enemy across a field, it has a harder time handling the possibility that the enemy is smiling from the passenger seat of a Jeep. American checkpoints became little tribunals of pop culture. Sentries asked questions no German officer would think to prepare. Who is Mickey Mouse's girlfriend? What is the capital of Illinois? Who won the World Series? What is the name of a popular cigarette? Men who answered too slowly found rifles lifted toward their chests. Generals were stopped. Staff officers were detained. Eisenhower himself was kept under heavier protection after a captured commando spread a story about an assassination plot. The Supreme Commander spent part of Christmas confined for his own safety, while the biggest battle in the West raged outside his map room. Captured German imposters paid with their lives. Wearing the enemy's uniform in combat placed them outside the protections soldiers normally expected. Several were tried as spies and shot by firing squads. So when Lieutenant Bogus saw American uniforms beside a German bunker on December 26th, he was not being jumpy. He was living inside a fear the Germans had deliberately built. The uniform no longer settled the question. The voice no longer settled the question. Even a friendly face could be a weapon. And still, the rescue had to come. South of Bastogne, General George Patton had done something almost no one in the Allied High Command expected him to do so quickly. At a crisis meeting in Verdun on December 19th, Eisenhower asked how fast forces could turn north and strike the German flank. Patton said he could attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room understood how insane that sounded. A field army is not a horse turning at a fence. It is fuel, bridges, traffic, ammunition, weather, food, maps, maintenance, medical units, and orders that have to reach men who are already cold, tired, and moving. But Patton's staff had prepared for the possibility before the meeting made it official. Routes had been studied, orders drafted, fuel considered. The turn north did not happen because Patton wished loudly enough. It happened because his staff had already given the wishbones. The main blow toward Bastogne fell to the 4th Armored Division. From around December 22nd, its columns pushed north from the Ardennes area, through roadblocks, mines, German infantry, blown bridges, hidden anti-tank guns, frozen roads, and villages that became fights of their own. Each mile had to be paid for. Each road was important because every road was part of the problem. The Germans knew it, the Americans knew it, and Bastogne sat at the far end of the answer. Then, on December 23rd, the weather broke. The clouds lifted. The sky over the Ardennes opened into hard winter blue. After a week in which the German attack had moved under cover, Allied aircraft returned. Fighter bombers found columns on roads. Transport planes came over Bastogne and dropped supplies into the surrounded town. Ammunition, rations, medical supplies, plasma, penicillin. Some of those planes were hit by German fire. Some crews flew straight and slow through flak because the men below needed what was inside the aircraft more than the crews needed comfort. For the defenders, the drops mattered materially. They also mattered morally. Men who had been rationing artillery shells knew they were not invisible. Men in cellars treating the wounded knew somebody outside the ring was still trying. And for the tankers south of the perimeter, the sight of parachutes over Bastogne became an accusation. Colonel Creighton Abrams saw the drops. He saw German guns firing at the aircraft. He understood that the town was close enough to see and still too far to save by caution. By December 26th, his force had been battered down. He did not have an endless number of tanks. He had enough for one hard punch. The careful way would preserve men and vehicles. The careful way might arrive after the town had lost what it could not get back. So Abrams gambled. The village of Assenois stood between his lead elements and the Bastogne perimeter. Take the road. Punch through the woods. Do not stop. That became the logic. The lead went to Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, 9 tanks. Armored infantry behind them in half-tracks. Cobra King at the front. Before the tanks moved, American artillery smashed the route ahead. More than 2,000 shells fell around Assenois and the German positions beyond it. Then the tanks drove. Fast. Straight. Guns firing. Engines straining. Tracks hammering frozen road. Bogus later described firing the 75mm gun almost like a machine gun, sending rounds into tree lines, buildings, and shadows before German soldiers with anti-tank weapons could settle their aim. The order was not elegant. Do not stop for roadblocks. Do not stop for mines. Do not stop if the tank behind you burns. Keep moving. Because a relief column that halted to solve every danger might become another wreck on the same road. German engineers blew mines behind the lead tanks. A half-track was hit. Infantry were wounded. The distance between the tanks and their foot support widened. For a time, Cobra King and the leading armor were almost alone in the woods, driving into the narrowest part of the story. Then the trees opened. There was the pillbox. There were the men in American uniforms. And all the roads of the battle seemed to meet in Lieutenant Bogus's head. The captured uniforms, the fake jeeps, the wrong passwords, the sentries asking cartoon questions with loaded rifles, the German commandos shot as spies, the rumor that a friendly uniform might be the last thing a man saw. Cobra King's gun pointed toward the bunker. Bogus called out. The men by the pillbox answered in American English. They did not run. They did not fire. They identified themselves. They were not Scorzeni's men. They were combat engineers from the 101st Airborne, men who had pushed out from inside the Bastogne perimeter and were working around the German position at the same moment the 4th Armored Division arrived from outside. Inside had met outside. The surrounded had met the rescuers. And the meeting happened at a German bunker, with a tank gun trained on Americans who had every reason to look like enemies. Cobra King fired on the pillbox and knocked it out. Then, roughly 2 miles from the center of Bastogne, the men of the 4th Armored linked hands with the men of the 101st. The ring had been broken. That is the part hidden under the famous photograph. The first gift Cobra King brought Bastogne was not food, not ammunition, not doctors. It was a correct decision made in a half-second by men exhausted enough to make the wrong one. The siege was broken because the tank kept moving. The rescue did not become a tragedy because the commander hesitated just long enough to ask. A little after 5 that evening, Abrams reached Bastogne and met McAuliffe. The German surrender demand had failed. The town had not fallen. The roads began to open. But history has a habit of stopping the camera right there, on the handshake, before the cost has time to enter the frame. Because the corridor into Bastogne was not a broad road of victory. It was a thin wound cut through German positions. A lane through woods and fields where enemy troops still sat close enough to hear engines in the dark. The Germans understood what that road meant. They had spent a week preventing it. Now they tried to close it. Supply trucks ran north with ammunition and food. Ambulances ran south with men who had waited days for evacuation. Drivers moved at night with little or no light, steering by the shape of the vehicle ahead and the feel of the road under tires. The corridor lived under shell fire and ambush threats. The 4th Armored paid heavily to keep it open. The lead company that had punched through did not finish the linkup looking like the clean spearhead from a map. It had been chewed down. Tanks were lost, men were killed and wounded. The handshake did not end the battle around Bastogne. It ended one form of danger and began another. The Germans kept attacking around the town into January. The Bulge slowly collapsed back east. Hitler's last great Western gamble spent men, armor, fuel, and time Germany could not afford. The war in Europe still had months of killing left, but the shape of the ending had changed. The Germans had needed Bastogne to function as a hinge. Instead, it became a wall. For the people in the basements, the relief came too late for the worst night. On Christmas Eve, before Cobra King reached the bunker, German aircraft came over Bastogne. The Luftwaffe was no longer the force it had once been, but it still had enough strength to bring death to a cellar. A bomb hit the department store on the Rue de Neufchâteau. Dr. Pryor's aid station was inside. Renée Lemaire and Augusta Chiwy had been working there. Wounded Americans lay below. The blast tore into the building and drove rubble down through the station. Around 30 wounded American soldiers were killed. Men who had survived the perimeter, the cold, the shell fire, and the first terrible hours of treatment died where they were supposed to be safest. Renée Lemaire died with them. Accounts differ in small details, as battlefield accounts often do, but they agree on the meaning. She stayed when she could have hidden. She worked when no one could have ordered her. Her body was later wrapped in white parachute silk, material she had reportedly hoped one day might become a wedding dress. She was 30. Augusta Chiwy survived the blast. Barely. The explosion injured her and knocked her out of the work for a short time. Then she returned to nursing. There is a kind of courage that looks dramatic from a distance, because distance removes the repetition. In the moment, it is less like a statue and more like getting up again with ringing ears, dust in your throat, and the knowledge that the next man on the floor still needs you. Chiwy went on treating the wounded. Then the siege ended. Then the war moved on. Then memory did what memory often does. It simplified. Renée Lemaire became remembered in Bastogne as the Angel of Bastogne, and she deserved it. Her sacrifice entered the town's story. It entered the American story of the battle. It eventually reached millions in fictionalized form. Augusta Chiwy's story took a harder path. She returned to Belgium and lived a quiet life. For decades, her name stayed outside the version most people knew. Dr. Pryor had mentioned her. Some veterans remembered. A few historians looked. But official recognition came late, painfully late. The United States honored her in 2011. Belgium honored her afterward. By then, she was an old woman, still describing what she had done as if it were not remarkable. As if walking through bullets disguised as dancing snow were simply something a person did because a wounded man was lying in the cold. Cobra King survived the war too. It fought beyond Bastogne, through Germany, and toward Czechoslovakia, then spent decades as an object whose full identity had to be rediscovered. Researchers, veterans, photographs, and records eventually confirmed the tank's role. Now it sits preserved, not glamorous, not sleek, not the kind of machine a poster would invent, just a battered steel box that carried men through a forest at the exact hour a city needed them. But the tank alone is not the story. The bunker alone is not the story. Even the word nuts is not the story. The story is a surrounded town that became important because roads mattered. A hospital captured before the siege could properly begin. A basement where 2 civilian nurses held together what a military system had lost. A German army that demanded surrender while its own attack was starving for fuel. A commando trick that turned uniforms into questions. And a tank commander who saw American soldiers beside a German bunker and did not let fear become murder. Bastogne was not saved by one clean legend. It was saved by a chain of imperfect decisions made under conditions that punished every mistake. The paratroopers held. The medics improvised. The nurses refused to hide. The pilots flew through flak. The tankers kept moving. And at the last dangerous second before relief became recognition, one man held his fire long enough for the truth to answer back.